think we all have things that are important to us that maybe we're not in the process of doing or bringing into our lives right now, of bringing to life so that we can share them with others. We're just not necessarily in the process of enlivening them, of living them out.
On Stories of Self, we go on journeys into the lives of ourselves and others. We see how stories connect, how they diverge, and how we can create our worlds and solve our problems. This is the real-life remix of storytelling, which is so often stranger than fiction. So come and sit around the fire, chill by the ocean, or get a coffee with me, as I delve into the stories of self that make, break, and remake us. Some stories are dramatic, some are serene, some will magically mirror you, and some will be delightfully different. I'm your host, Katie Reeve Arnold, and this is Stories of Self.
A few years ago, it felt like the whole world was just turning and turning for me, that everything was just ongoing, that the hamster on the wheel couldn't take a turn to pause. There was no moment to actually stop and think about where I was or what I was doing or where I was going. And even if there was, what was I going to do about it anyway? And maybe that wasn't just a few years ago. Maybe only it was a few years ago that I noticed that issue. But it had felt like that my whole life. Over and over, it felt like I was pulled into this ongoing, churning spectrum of life that I just couldn't stop. I couldn't take a chance. I couldn't take a moment to actually think about what I wanted, or did I want this, how I wanted to go forwards. There was no option for that. At least that's how it felt for me. It really didn't feel like I had any option to do anything but to follow the set path. And I think that's the thing, really. When the path is so set and the path is so clear, then it doesn't feel like there's any moment to step aside from it or pause on it. Because really, it's one of those travelators you get, like at the airport, or an escalator in a mall or something, or in the shopping centre, right? You've got this thing that's just continually going, and all you're supposed to do is step on it and keep going. That's how it can feel anyway. That's how it felt to me. And the thing is that the reason I wanted to take some time off and some time to myself was because something wasn't ringing right for me. Something wasn't ringing true about the direction that this moving walkway was taking me in, the direction I was taking myself in by standing on this moving walkway, the direction that every action of my life was actually progressing me in. And I wasn't really sure or happy or certain at all that this was the way I wanted to go. But the whole rest of the world seemed pretty happy about it, and it seemed to judge it as the right thing to do. So it didn't feel like I could take the time off. It was taking time off was against what I've been told by the world. This was a really big problem for me. And it wasn't easy to take that time out against what I was being told by the world, to actually look and see whether this was the right move for me, what would be the right move for me going forwards, to just take some time to be at peace and to breathe and to see who I was and where I wanted to be and go in the world. Taking time for me and taking time to stop wasn't easy, but it was incredibly valuable. If I hadn't been brave enough at some point, or whether it was brave or foolhardy, to be honest with you at the time, I don't think I knew which it was. But all I knew was if I didn't make a stop happen, then there wasn't a natural one coming. I didn't see any natural stopping points before retirement and old age and this kind of thing. I didn't see any natural stopping points. And so if I needed a stopping point, I had to make one. Or I had to, in my new understanding that I was choosing every moment of my life, I would have to understand and recognize that I was choosing not to stop. If I carried on going, I was choosing to carry on going. If I didn't stop, even though it was against the grain of what I saw the world wanting from me, I was going to have to take on the fact that I was choosing to keep going. I was choosing not to stop. And I couldn't do that because I felt like I was betraying myself. I felt like I wasn't being true to myself. And so in the end, I did. I was brave enough to stop. I made a stop. And it really changed my life. I would really recommend creating and cultivating a space to take some time out and reflect on yourself and your life when you need to. And I would recommend creating and cultivating that space on the regular. Even though maybe you don't feel desperately like you need to stop, it's good to take a little moment and just have a breather and see where you're at. Take stock of everything and make sure that when you restart, when you get going again, that you're going in the direction you want to, that you're being the you want to be as you move down that path you want to move down. I think it can be a lot more difficult to stop for some people. I think that sometimes when people are ingrained in a certain way of life and a certain way of being, maybe it's about having certain things. It does cost a little money to stop. However, I would say that it more than made back its value. The amount of money I lost in stopping, I more than made back the value in how I restarted. So in restarting in a way that was more true to me, it was immediately more lucrative per hour once I restarted what I was doing, or once I commenced on my own true path. So in that way, although it can take some money and some time to stop, it's really worthy, it's really worthwhile. So I would really recommend kind of making some space for that. And it's kind of easy to make space for it by just not doing certain things. So there's certain things that, as I cultivated the space to stop, I didn't do anymore. I couldn't justify them against the desire to stop and the desire to take a little space for me. I couldn't justify getting takeaway dinners. I couldn't justify going out to restaurants much. I couldn't justify nights in the pub. But it saved me the money in order to make the stop that I needed. So it's about doing what you need when you need. Another time in life, maybe I would prioritize a dinner out with friends, or I'd prioritize a night socializing in the pub, but it just wasn't a priority for me at that time. So by focusing on what I valued and what I prioritized at that moment, I was able to make that space in order to stop. Stopping was an interesting thing because it didn't go quite as I thought. Stopping involved embracing some things that I kind of knew were there in the background that wanted to be embraced as part of my life rather than pushed away. But actually, stopping also involved letting go of how I thought I should be and how I thought life should be. So stopping involved as much letting go as it did commencing with things. It really involved making sure that what I was stepping forward into was in alignment with who I am right now. And in that way, it involved letting go of what I had maybe wanted in the past that was now no longer aligned. Now, for me, I'm a bit fortunate in that most of the things that I had wanted in the past, I had already jumped into. I'd already jumped into doing, jumped into being, jumped into having in my life. But actually, the ones that were in the past for me and I hadn't jumped into, I reached a point where I realized if they were no longer things I wanted, I couldn't catch up with that past version of me who hadn't done that. I needed to maybe let it go. If I didn't want those things anymore, it was time to move on to something else. And that did involve for me letting go of some things that I had thought I would do in my life, some things I had thought I would be, some things I had thought I would have, some things I had thought would be an important part of my life, things I had wanted. But it was a past version of me that wanted them, not the present day me that was reflecting on them then. So I had to let go. And in that, I kind of moved forwards in myself. So now I'm coming from a more solid and true place of where I am right now. I can't predict or project what I'll want in the future as the future me. I can only predict and project it from the present me. But what I can do is, as every present me shifts into the future me I'm creating, I can be in a dynamic process of accepting who that new version of me is and letting go of the things that are no longer aligned with me and bringing in things that are aligned with me. By aligned, I mean in connection with the truth of who I am and my true purpose. So, and in any moment, that can also change. So, what I think I found when I stopped is actually the difference between the wealth and worth that was projected on me by society, that was given to me as a child, those values that were handed over and that I swallowed whole. I found the difference between those and the wealth and worth I now see as the grown present version of me, those things that I carry with me, those things that grow and lift and ebb and flow as I move, those things that are not static. In the past, I think I had seen the development of wealth as being something you physically had, whether it was in property or whether it was in cash in the bank or whatever way you were looking at it, whether it was a car on the driveway. It was those kinds of things that I saw the wealth in. But now I see more the wealth in being who I want to be, being able to use my time in the way I want to use it, and being able to move forwards and change in harmony with who I really am, so that I can live the life I want to live. Today, tomorrow, into the future. And if that life I want to live changes, I can allow that, I can enable it. I think we all have things that are important to us specifically. And I think we all have things that are important to us that maybe we're not in the process of doing or bringing into our lives right now, of bringing to life so that we can share them with others. We're just not necessarily in the process of enlivening them, of living them out. And the thing is, I recognized when I took the time to stop, is that I took the time to question why. If there were things that I really wanted to do, why were they not part of my life in the present? Was there a good reason? Was it something that had to be put off to a specific time or location? And if so, did I have a projection for when I was thinking of doing that? You know, was I actually actively bringing something like kite surfing that I want to do, which, you know, is not something you can just do necessarily anywhere, but there are certain places that are better for it and better to learn it and that kind of thing. Did I have a projection for when I was going to bring that into my life? Or was that going to be something that slipped by and I would end up thinking to myself, oh, actually, that was a past version of me that wanted to do that, and now I no longer do. And so I would have to let it go without doing it. I think this is where the regrets of life come from, when we actually let something go in our lives, as in we want it, but we don't plan it in. So we let it go through our lives until we no longer want it anymore. And I know that there's a kind of a thing of what's for you won't pass you by, and if it passes you by, it was never truly for you. I know that phrase. But to be honest with you, I think there are different phases in our life when different things are for us. During my late 20s and early 30s, well, just all through my 30s, I really was fanatical scuba diver. I really enjoyed scuba diving. And I spent a lot of my time scuba diving. In fact, I was working in scuba diving as well. And that was something that was so precious to me. And I still love it. I still love it. But do I want to go out every single day, all year round, several times a day, scuba diving now? No, not as much, no. For time periods, for blocks of time, yes, that would be beautiful. That's lovely. That's wonderful. It's something I love and enjoy still. But is it a life I want to live ongoingly from dawn till dusk, every single day of the week, every single day of the year, every single year of the decade? No, because I've moved on from that. And so maybe that will come back around in my life. Maybe it won't. But the main thing is that actually I did that when it was a big driving force in my life. When I loved it so much, I made space and time and I did it. And I want the same to be true for kite surfing. So I want to make sure that that's not something in my life that slips by without me ever doing it. Even though I do, in some ways, anticipate that maybe in 20, 30 years' time, I won't feel like kite surfing is necessarily a part of my everyday, it's for me right now kind of feeling. So I think this is the way to move through life without having regrets. If something is important to you and you're not doing it, then why? And if there's a good reason, maybe plan towards it. But if there's not, then change that. Change it so that you're bringing the things you want to do right now into your life on a day-to-day or week-to-week or month-to-month, year-to-year basis. Bring in what you want right now. Don't take for granted the idea that you'll always want that. Because we change. We are here to change. We are beings of change. We perceive time in a way that's moving forwards. We're moving through it. Now, the human perception of time is something that, perhaps is specific to our world and our perspective. Yeah? And so time itself may not necessarily exist at all. And so, in fact, I don't think it does. I think that our perspective is that we perceive time. One of our purposes is that we perceive time. And so in that time, we can absorb and we can pass through change. And so that change is an intrinsic part of what it is we are doing here, what it is we are experiencing as human beings. So embrace that change. Don't expect it not to happen, and don't reject it if it does. But rather be fully with who you are right now and embrace that change when it comes. Even then, sometimes it can be bittersweet. Embrace it anyway, because the bittersweetness comes from the joy you had and of letting go of that joy and that desire and that love for something, whether you actually achieved that or saw it through or not. If it's not aligned with you right now, then you don't force yourself into it. There's no need to. You're not forcing yourself into a past version of yourself that you dreamed up or society handed to you when you were in your teens or when you were a young child or when you were in your 20s. Maybe at 30 you wanted to do something. If you don't want to do it in 10 years from there, then you don't have to. It's all about being with who you are right now. And change only really seems challenging until you discover it's not. Change can seem so challenging. It can seem like something that takes time, and it can seem like something that's difficult. It can seem like something that you need help with and other people are able to do with ease and you're not. But actually, change, once you absorb it, once you start living with it, once you bring it within you and cultivate it within you as a dynamic system you live within, as something that you bring to every day of your life, it's something you take joy in rather than fear or hold against. In that case, it's not difficult at all. It's not change that's difficult. It's noticing the blocks in us that are so ingrained. These blocks are things that are stopping us, and sometimes they can be so ingrained in us, in our lives and in society, that we can't even see them to know they are blocking us. That can be very, very difficult. So the thing is that and this is why we can often give better advice to others on their situation than we can give to ourselves on our own situation. Have you ever found that? I found that a lot, and I'm much better at advising others than I am at advising myself. And that others then can see my situation more clearly than I can. This is just because we cannot see our own blocks. And actually, if we can allow other people into our lives, if we can open up, then we can actually have other people indicate our blocks to us, or indicate, if they can't see our blocks, maybe they could indicate different paths and different options to us that had been hidden behind the blocks we had, so we didn't perceive of them in order to choose them. So change itself is not difficult. It's identifying the blocks that are difficult. And there's lots of different ways to do that. There's lots of different ways to help yourself cultivate change in your own life, to help yourself come into alignment with who you truly are, to help yourself to be true and live true to yourself. I've got a limited podcast series coming out soon with a friend of mine, Kate Melandi. We've worked together to develop this series to help everybody jump into chosen change and to help everybody see their blocks and address them and become themselves more so. We're looking forward to sharing it with you. Stick with us and we'll get it to you very, very soon.
We are all telling our stories. And we are all telling ourselves stories about it all. Are you brave enough to walk with me into hearing, considering and understanding the stories we tell? Join me next time, where we'll be considering more stories and illusions and stepping into creating the freedom we desire. Every moment, we are who we are choosing to be. You choose. Choose you, because your story matters.